There's a quote from Craig Greschel. He says, when you delegate tasks, you create followers, but when you delegate authority, you create leaders. It's not just about offloading tasks. It's about empowering your staff to get better and helping the business get better. And ultimately, you as a leader are getting better because you're not doing those low-level things
I
anymore.
was listening to a book by Donald Miller, and it's in the early part of the book, but he talks about if you are an employee, in order for the business to truly make money on you, to have you be a good investment, they've got to be able to make a 5 times return. You need to be grabbing things off of your plate and doing things more valuable. And if you're the business owner, you need to realize that you need to be giving that employee that much work to do or that much value to create so that having that person on your team makes it fiscally responsible to have them.
Welcome, entrepreneurs, to Pay or Quit.
Where we reveal the gritty truth behind business success.
People see the glory, but not the struggle it takes to get there.
We're here to share the real stories of entrepreneurs navigating the tough intersection of business and relationships. I'm Tony Klein.
And I'm Shawn Johnson, and together we'll guide you through the real challenges faced as serial entrepreneurs.
Join us for the untold stories behind the scenes.
Buckle in, it might get messy.
One of the more common questions that we get when we are working with our coaching or consulting clients is all about delegation. And so we wanted to have a conversation today about how do we move from being a entrepreneur that is operating deep in the business to extracting ourselves from the day to day and trying to delegate more and more tasks. And Shawn, you and I have both been through that. We've both had some success with it. We've both struggled with it, and it just seems to be more and more of a topic that the business owner continues to be the thing that holds the company back because they don't delegate. And so I thought this would be a great topic for us to explore today, and love to get your input.
Yeah, I love this topic because it seems like so common. Entrepreneurs struggle with this, and it's this isn't really something that's taught, and it's something you have to just learn, and really fail at a few times before you're like, okay, we got to do things differently here, and let's try to make this business better. Because if I'm constantly in the business, I can actually move this business forward, right? If we're doing the tasks, especially those lower level tasks every day, well, shoot, there's better things you could be doing with your time. So yeah, I'm excited about this topic, Tony. I've struggled with this myself, but I'll share today. Hopefully, we'll get through all kinds of good points, but I'll share today what has worked for me to just get the staff to do the tasks that I shouldn't be doing, and hopefully getting those higher level tasks on my plate and not worrying about the littler stuff and trusting the staff to do it.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how do we actually go about defining what we should be working on, what we shouldn't be working on, because there's so much as an entrepreneur. Generally, when we start, some people do start at a bigger scale where they immediately start with a big team. Uh, Most people, though, when they're in the entrepreneurial startup phase, it's you or you and a couple of people or something like that. And the type of person that's willing to risk everything to start a business, they probably are more that type A person that is just, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to take charge and I'm going to just bulldoze my way through this. And at some point, we have to remove ourselves from being that bulldozer that's just going to smash our head against something until we just finally make progress and realize that there's better ways of doing it. And part of that is being able to leverage other people on your team. What do you think holds most people back from mentally being able to make that shift to, because it's one thing to delegate something, it's something else entirely to know what to delegate, and then the third thing is to be comfortable and trust yourself and your team to delegate those things.
Yeah, so I think it's two things. I think it's the starting point for most entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs become business owners because they were good technicians. And they were good technicians at doing whatever the job was. And so therefore they weren't really focused on being a business owner at the beginning. And now it's time, look, my business has scaled a little bit. I need help. How do I actually delegate that help to do what I need them to do to become that technician so I could elevate into a leadership business owner role? So that's one. I think that the transition from technician to business owner is very difficult for a lot, and it's a very common difficulty, if you will. Number two is that as type A folks, we think that our way is the only way or the best way to do things. And it's hard for many of us to get over that hurdle that even if somebody does it at a lesser value than I do it myself, that's still better than me doing it because I can't do all things all the time, right? So we have to get over that hurdle of thinking I'm the only one that could do it. Or the other common thing is if I don't do it, it doesn't get done right. Well, those are just limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think we got to get past those in order to elevate business.
So so how do we get past those? We acknowledge, yep, that's holding us back. What are some of the first steps? You said you know some things that you've tried that have worked. What are some things that we can put in place to move from, okay, I believe you, I got to get past this. I'm willing to do it. Let's do it. How do we do it?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tony. I hope to hear your thoughts on this. But what has worked for me in the past is just to track exactly what I do day in and day out by the 5 minute or 15-minute increments. And all of those things that are during the day that aren't actually creating value for the business. So, like checking email or, um, opening up the store, if you will, like me going and turning the light switch on and unlocking the front door, un, you know, unlocking the alarm system, those types of things. Those are what I would call low level tasks, and I would rate them $1, $2, $3, $4. Three and fours are the ones that are actually creating value for the business. Me bringing in sales, me looking at the P and L, making sure that the accounting is square, those types of things. And I also like to look at it as a second factor. Not only is it a low level or a high level task, but is it something that brings me energy or does it take away from me? Um, if it takes away from me, then and it's a 3 or 4, then I need to find a higher level staff member to take that position or that task away from me, if you will. So those are things that work for me. I have a follow up with that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to really to define that.
Yeah, that's something that have always struggled with. I've always been that person that, from an early age, would take charge and right or wrong, right? I would just say I've got to do things my way, and you and I have experienced a little bit of that when we were business partners. It's I'll buy into it as long as I feel that I had a hand in making that decision and having a hand in where we're going, but for me, now that I'm a leader again on my own company and I have a team, I tell myself this probably 4 or 5 times a day. I tell myself I should only do the things that only I can do. And then I should figure out how to peel off everything else because if I'm not doing the things that only I can do, nobody's doing those things. And so it's become a discipline where there are things I could probably do something a little bit better than one of my teammates at this point just because of repetition or experience. But every time I do that thing, I am I'm weakening my team.
Mhm.
I'm not giving them an opportunity to improve, to have them do something that I can then give feedback on to improve or help them improve. And then I'm also not doing something else that only I can do. And they're counting on me to do the things that only I can do. And I have to continually remind myself of that because there are things that I love to do, formatting. Like I just
Mhm.
get deep into a PowerPoint presentation, formatting slides or picking out fonts for a document. Like, why am I doing that? Why do I care about that? Somebody needs to care about some of that stuff, but it shouldn't be me at that high level. And so I think that's the first step is having that discipline to hold yourself accountable and then I tell my team to hold me accountable too. Sometimes I'll start to do something and they're like, "That you shouldn't be doing that." I'll take that, and they take it and run with it.
I love that. There's a quote from Craig Greschel. He says, "When you delegate tasks, you create followers, but when you delegate authority, you create leaders." And I love that. It's like
Mm,
a reminder that it's not just about offloading tasks. It's about empowering your staff to get better and helping the business get better. And ultimately, you as a leader are getting better because you're not doing those low level things anymore.
Yeah. I was listening to a book by Donald Miller. I think it's called Business Made Simple or something like that. And it's in the early part of the book, but he talks about when you have an employee, or if you are an employee, that in order for the business to truly make money on you, to have you be a good investment, they've got to be able to make a 5 times return.
Mm.
So if they pay you $1, I always thought, yeah, if you can get a 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 times return, you're probably doing pretty good with that employee. But he was stressing that 1 to 5 is really the number that you want to target. And so if you're an employee, you need to be grabbing things off of your plate and doing things more valuable. And if you're the business owner, you need to realize that you need to be giving that employee that much work to do or that much value to create, so that having that person on your team makes it fiscally responsible to have them be an investment as opposed to an expense.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. Now let's theoretically think through this. Now we've delegated the authority or the tasks off to our staff. How do we keep them empowered to actually continue on and run with the torch, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I think but before I answer that, I think we're missing one thing. I always talk about when we're putting somebody in a position, we want to give them three things. We want to give them the ownership of the outcome and the role and responsibility. And then we want to give them the authority to make decisions and do what needs to be done. And then we want to give them the autonomy to be able to do it without having to come to us or come to somebody else to get that approval. So we want the ownership, authority, and autonomy. And I think if we can create that, then we've opened up a space for them to be able to go and do the work that we need them to do. Now, how do we do that? How do we properly communicate what needs to be done? I think that really comes down to that high level vision and mission, the core values, the stuff that all that gooey stuff that I think people they either don't do or they do, and they spend 5 hours putting all this together and they throw it in a drawer and say, yeah, we have core values. But if you ask people what they are on their team, they don't really answer. But the reason we put all that stuff together is so that they have a filter to filter their decisions through in absence of a clear policy. And then we have our policies put together so that those are there to answer questions in absence of the leader that's leading the company. So I really think it's giving them the why about why we exist as opposed to just the how or how to do the job.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So what you're saying is that that'll help them filter and understand where the target is, what the goal is with this. The other point I would add to what you're saying is to be extremely clear in the expectations. I think as leaders, we assume that people know what we want out of them. And instead of actually explaining what we want, let me give an example. Our video editor for this, John, he's awesome. I have found that the more clear I can be with what I'm needing from him, the way better outcome I get, like just way more refined. And I think that goes with every staff member. The more clear we can be, don't assume that they know, and don't actually like treat them like children, like they don't know anything. That's not what I'm saying. But let's just, communicate on a level that says, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how we get to that. Then let them run with it, right? Let them actually make the decisions on how to achieve that outcome. I think is something that is missed. If we just assume that they know what to do, they're probably not going to do it well. You're going to get upset because it's not been done to your standards, and really, it's usually a communication problem with the leader that I have seen.
Yeah, you've said a lot of really smart things over the years that I've just incorporated into part of my vocabulary. But one of the things I remember, we were in a meeting, and the first time you said it, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And now I just say it all the time. But you used to say, clear is kind. And the more clear you can be, the more kind you are to the people that you're communicating with. And so taking that extra time to communicate exactly what those expectations are, and then leaving the door open, I think, to have some follow-up discussion about that clarity, being really intentional about not just having a one-way conversation where you're just communicating this is what's expected, but also having that a way for them to feed it back. I remember there was one point in when we were working together where I thought, and this was with somebody that was on our team, I thought I had clearly communicated my expectations of what we needed to do on a project. And luckily, I don't know why, but I started this practice of, okay, well, I want you to go back and document what we're doing forward just to make sure we're all on the same page. And when they put that on paper and they emailed it to me, we were not at all on the same page. What I thought I had communicated, I had not properly communicated, and they had not properly received the message. And so I think that's another piece of that delegation, which is don't just delegate, but create that feedback loop where they're able to give that feedback and tell you what they think you've just delegated so that we're both now on the same page and we'll get those better results.
Now I love that. I actually it reminds me, like, when you are communicating expectations to somebody, it is always nice to have them repeat back. It's almost like when you go to a restaurant and you give an order and they repeat back your order. The point of that is to make sure that you're both on the same page of what you're actually ordering, right? Same type of deal. I think that applies to business as well. So Sally, what how are you going to take this task and deliver this and have them repeat back on what the expectations are?
Yeah, if I'm afraid to delegate because I'm afraid that the results are not going to be delivered, or once I let go of it, I'm kind of out of the loop.
Mm.
What's a good way to be able to make sure that what we've delegated actually gets done?
Yeah, I think it's the Ronald Reagan way of doing things: trust but verify. Trust that they're going to do it, but verify that they're going to do it. And if they didn't do it to your liking, I actually think that's a moment for reflection on the leader. Did I not communicate appropriately, or did I not set up the right expectations for my staff member to deliver what I was expecting them to deliver? And if the answer to that is slightly no, then you have some adjusting as a leader to go. And remember that everybody receives and gives information differently. We all communicate differently. So you might have to give an instruction to one staff member different than you give an instruction to another staff member, because we're different people and we receive and we communicate differently. So that's one thing that I've learned the hard way. I would just, here's what it is. It's like almost authoritative. Here it is. Get the job done. Then I realize, like, one person's like, it doesn't even make sense. It's like a foreign language to them. And there was nothing wrong with that. It's just me as a leader, I wasn't communicating effectively.
So now that we've communicated it, one of the things that I think that is important is that we have a way to follow up with that, and we're getting a little bit into the technical side of how to do this, but I think it's important to talk about KPIs if you're going to delegate. So KPIs are just, it stands for key performance indicators, and being able to track what you've delegated or what you expect. And sometimes we're talking about two different things. Sometimes we're talking about delegating an entire role, and then sometimes we're talking about delegating responsibilities within that role. So when we delegate a role, we need to be really clear on the boundaries of where that role starts and stops, but also then the responsibilities of that role. And when we delegate those responsibilities, we need to have a way as the leader to understand, are those things being done? And if they are they being done satisfactorily? Are we meeting expectations? And if not, what kind of corrective action can we take? So, do you have any feedback or any insights on creating KPIs, or is that just a fancy business jargon and they're not really that important? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I would say I'm not an expert in this, but what I found it works is keeping them simple to track, not having too many key points to track, like 3 to 5 is probably the max that you would want to, and do it based on the outcome, not on the journey, if you will, of of the role. So how do we, like the outcome would be, we expect to bring in 30 new clients in this quarter. That would be an outcome. And that's an easy thing to track. You could get, 30 new clients that are ideal customers if you want to get a little bit more granular, because obviously you don't want to bring on all business, not all business good business, but that's a different story. But that's how I would do it. I just keep it simple, keep it where both you and the staff member are on the same page and understand the actual outcome. I think just giving KPIs for the sake of giving KPIs can actually detract from the outcome. It's demoralizing for the staff member if they don't really buy into or understand what is expected of them.
Yeah. We track, and all the clients that I work with, we wind up tracking KPIs on a scoreboard. And there's this paradox, I guess, of where you want your entire scorecard or scoreboard to be all green, meaning we're hitting every one of those KPIs. But if it's all green and it's always all green, then we're just tracking stuff for busy work
Mm-hmm.
because we're measuring. So there's this thing where we want to have 100% positive performance, but if we always have 100% positive performance, we're probably tracking the wrong KPIs because we want to use this as a way to improve our business and improve performance of our team. So, we want to shoot for 100%, but we really want to look at things where we need improvement. So we want to put things on there where those KPIs are red. And that winds up being, if you target 80%, 75%, now we know what to work on. And then we focus on improving those things. And so as we create these, they will be adjusted over time. Either the goal will change or the actual metric that we're tracking will change. But we have to have some way as a leader to know the things that we've delegated, whether it's on an official scoreboard or not. We can't just delegate and dump and then walk away and say, okay, well, that's going to take care of itself, because it doesn't.
What would you do on the opposite effect there if everything's red? Do you move the goalpost? How do you coach through that?
Well, one of the things that I really focus on is we talk a lot about building championship teams, and we talked about this on this podcast before. But I have that expectation. If you just say we're all on a team, or we're all in a family, like, yeah, I have family members that you probably wouldn't want to work with. Like, that's not in this capacity, right? There's family is family, and you love the family for who they are, not necessarily what they bring to the team. So then you say, okay, well, we're gonna switch to a team, and then, well, a team is just a team. You can have an 0-20 team where they haven't won any games in 20 games, but you're still a team. So a high performance team is just a little bit better than that. But when you start talking about being on a championship team, you start talking about, would this happen or would this be tolerated on a championship team? And it just creates this different atmosphere. And so if things are constantly red, I think that's a leadership problem, because you've either got the wrong person doing the wrong role, or well, a lot of times when I start working with companies that have tried to roll out EOS or something like that, we look at their scorecard and they've had 4 months worth of weekly check-ins where they've had some metric continue to be red, and it's just become, we've just accepted this culture of mediocrity. And now the scorecard is actually reinforcing it's okay to do a bad job because we report on it and we move on. And so we have to really take a look at, okay, if we're supposed to be bringing on 30 clients and we're bringing on 6, okay, we know the ultimate goal is to get to 30, but we need to figure out what's preventing us from getting from 6 to 30. And maybe we need to make some adjustments. And it's kind of like working out. The ultimate, we may have an ultimate weight that we want to bench press, but we're not going to be able to wake up in the morning and hit that without making incremental improvements. So I think we need to correct that scorecard to where we get back to the culture of expectation, where we're hitting whatever goal we're setting. So I don't like to constantly be moving the goalposts, but when we're first setting this up, we have to build that momentum where we are seeing a sea of green so that the red stands out. And then I always sort of am over dramatic and overreact when there's red, because I want them to know that one cell of red on our spreadsheet is a big deal. So, there is that transition from, okay, well, we are going to have to move the goalpost back a little bit so that we can start seeing some green. But then we start amping up and we go from 6 clients this week, then 7 clients next week, then 8, and ramping it up and putting the screws. But if it's just a sea of red, your team and your company has just accepted a culture of mediocrity, and that is just the death of a company.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot to be said about allowing someone to achieve small wins and small wins over and over again. I think if you had these big expectations, especially for a new employee, but any employee that were unachievable or really difficult to achieve at first, and all they see is a sea of red, it's demoralizing. It would be horrible to work in that situation for myself. I would feel like, well, geez, I can't create any value here. Even though I'm bringing on some clients, it's not enough clients, and it's not good enough, and it would demoralize me, and it would probably start to affect other staff members, is my guess.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's
Okay.
put a bow on this a little bit, but I have a thought. Like, I remember back early on in my business career, and I would have staff members knock on my office door and ask repeated questions over and over and over again. And I had to have a mental shift, mindset shift in myself in order for that. It wasn't their fault. They had valid questions, but I had to shift myself in order to get that to stop. What's your thoughts on how to get that to stop, Tony? And I'll share what worked for me.
Okay. Without going deep into a rabbit hole, I'm going to keep this real surface level because there's a lot of things that we coach about in that. But your team is coming to you because you have established yourself as the place to get the answers. And so we want to create one source of truth for them to get the answer. And so, in absence of anything else, they want to come to you. Number one, we've probably not properly done those three those three components that we talk about, where we've not given them the ownership to do the role, we've not given them the authority to do the role, and we've not given them the autonomy, or some combination of those three. If we've done all of those things, part of giving them the autonomy is giving them one source of truth to go and get the answer. And in absence of anything else, they're coming to you because you are their one source of truth to get the answer. So what we need to do is create a set of policies where we have our policy, that our documentation that says this is what we do in these situations. And now that becomes the one source of truth instead of you. So for me, it's all about, they have to have that. Every company has that one source of truth in some degree. And some companies have 5 sources of truth, which means it's not really true because you say one thing, I say something else, and which is it, right? So it's being really clear about creating that one source of truth and removing yourself from providing answers. I always say stop answering questions and start asking them.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, so I think you hit it on the nail there. One thing, the actual tactic, once the source of truth was written out, which is a struggle for a lot of new businesses. Even some older businesses don't have a policy procedures manual or whatever you want to call it. But it was me redirecting the question back on them and simply saying, "What do you think you should do?" Because if they're coming to you as the easy button, remember the old Staples easy button?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why they're coming, because they don't want to actually critically think. But if you
Yep.
turn that back around, what do you think you should do? Or how would you handle this situation? Or what do you think's best for our customer? Those types of questions. To turn it back around, they start to, oh, actually, I know the answer to this. I didn't
Hmm.
stop and think about the answer. I can actually go and execute on this without even needing your help. And it eventually nobody even comes to talk to you anymore, which is a good thing. You get to do your
Yeah.
work, and they're doing their work, and they're empowered to make that decision. And 9 times out of 10, I've found that they already know the answer, especially when there is a source of truth from it. Um,
Yeah.
they just want the easy button. Don't be the easy button is my point.
Yeah, it's so hard. Some of our personalities, the reason we started businesses is because we thought we knew how to do something, and then, of course, once we start it, we, you know, get kicked in the teeth and find out that we don't really know as much as we think we do, but then we go and we learn that. And so now we've learned how to overcome those challenges. We learn how to answer objections. We learn how to create product or whatever. And then to let go of that again after having already gone through that struggle once, it just it's a challenge for us. But I think that's where businesses really start to grow exponentially, is the leader has to be comfortable with the small failures that come along with delegating to be able to achieve those really big wins that also come along with building a big team that you can delegate those responsibilities and authority to.
Yeah, I love it. It's okay that your staff makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. They're going to make them. Let them make them. That's how
Yeah.
they learn, and that's how the business gets better.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what do you say? It's in the can.
It's in the can.
It's in the can.
That's a
That
wrap.
was good stuff, Tony. Hey, on a little teaser here, I want a future talk. I've had a few people reach out and say, I wish Tony would explain in deeper detail on what he goes through during an ultra marathon, mentally, physically, like the grit, the guts, the nasty, the oh look, there's an orange, I'm hallucinating. I've heard all the funny stories, but
Yeah.
our audience wants to hear it. So that'd be a fun talk.
All right. Well, you realize when I'm out there for one of these ultra marathons, I'm out there for, 80 to 100 hours. So I go through a lot. So be
Okay,
ready.
maybe we don't want an 80 to 100-hour podcast. So, I mean,
Right.
but
Just the
you
lowlights.
like what
Just
I
the
did
lowlights.
there? We talked about running, and had to squeeze that in. So you're welcome.
I love it. Yeah.
It's in the can.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next time to cut through the noise of what it really takes to be a successful entrepreneur.
If today's episode hit home, share it with a friend, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.